So I think this last week has been one of the craziest weeks of my entire career. And I've been overwhelmed by all the people that have reached out. I've had great interviews this last week, had some really exciting interviews with a lot of people. And I have even more scheduled next week, and I would like to cancel all of them just so I can completely disconnect, spend time with the family, and not think about anything related to work for a full week. And so that's why I'm recording my interview, hoping that'll save me a lot of time, but also save people time, because this will be a condensed 15-minute interview rather than a 30-minute interview, and that will allow them to share this with people on their team if there's interest. And before I dive in, before I start my interview, I do want to say that I believe Debanjan is a fantastic CEO. I know he has a lot of support coming from product, from engineering, from CFDS, sales, customer success. Really excited about the future of Data Robot for anyone who's considering joining the company. Some of the best people in the industry for applied AI work at that company. My issues were related with the board and a few other executives not with the company in the trajectory. So diving into my interview, interviews are interesting because you're trying to assess someone's competency on a few different domains, whether that's a technical competency, their emotional intelligence, general intelligence, etc. You're trying to understand their experience to see if you trust them to provide value for your company. So to the best of my ability, I will blitz through a 15-minute interview and give you a background of who I am and what I'm about. So if I had to define two core competencies that make me up, that have been helpful for me during my career, I have a very obsessive personality, and I also have a disregard for the rules. I don't care what's been done. I don't care what I'm supposed to be doing. I care what I want to do, and that's helpful. That has been helpful for me. So if I go back in time to when I was in high school, I was very obsessed with snowboarding, and I eventually was able to get a snowboard sponsor when I was 16. My parents were concerned that I would not go to college. I did go to college, but not the way that they thought I would. To save money, I lived in the woods in the snow in Logan, Utah for 2 years, and within 3 months that made national news. I was on radio talk shows, newspapers, I was on TV. I ended up getting 2 sponsors doing it. I became a celebrity on campus with the students, but with also the professors. And the reason I tell that story, that's an example of breaking the rules, but I also learned to program. I learned HTML, CSS, that eventually developed into the LAMP stack, PHP. I started an e-commerce company around 2003, and I was shipping and selling rock climbing gear all over the world. I was introduced to computer vision, fell in love with it, and high-performance computing. So some people think I'm an AI nerd. Really, I'm a high-performance computing nerd. I like big distributed systems to work really hard. I did an internship for the Desert Research Institute in Reno doing satellite image processing. I had a lot of passion projects along the way. One of the passion projects was distributed computing, trying to steal compute cycles from browsers using Java. So if you looked at a web page, I could use a few compute cycles, which I think probably violates some code of conduct at the time, but I was just so fascinated by that. I thought it was really fun. I also did a project with genetic algorithms and plasma fractals where I was trying to have people vote on them to produce better abstract art pieces at the time. And I was also introduced to genetic programming, which I thought was fascinating, and genetic algorithms became a big obsession of mine at the time. I studied chemical engineering to satisfy my interest in math and also fulfill my prereqs for medical school. I took the MCAT. My dad's a doctor, my brother's a doctor, and I was planning on going to medical school. Fortunately, that did not happen, and I went and worked for Intel and Micron for 5 years. Everything related to data. SPC, process control, fault detection, yield analysis, excursion analysis, predictive preventable maintenance. And after 5 years, I had an opportunity to go join a hedge fund as a quant, which is slang for quantitative analyst. So I worked at a hedge fund on a 600 GPU cluster. I dealt with cluster management. I dealt with converting all of the quant code into pure GPU code. We had 5-year backtests that run exclusively on the GPU. They never talked to the CPU during the backtesting, which I was quite proud of. And we were very aggressive on our compute efficiencies. We would Pareto out the timing on all elements of our scripts, and then we would bring in world-class consultants to rewrite everything in OpenMP and CUDA. After a year of doing that, I had a lot of pressure from home to get a new job because my family wasn't seeing me. I was leaving in the dark, coming home in the dark, and it was also changing my personality. It was making me a bigger asshole. So I joined Sequoia Capital, a company called HireView. I was their founding data scientist. I became their chief data scientist, built out their team, hired a team of PhD physicists. One of the members I hired was top 60 in the world on Kaggle, and at the time I was there, we delivered about 14 patents, and we were chasing video interview outcome prediction as well as a bunch of different algorithms and approaches related to that process. Built resume models and brought automated speech recognition in-house, the Deep Speech 2 system. We had better word error rates than Google APIs at the time. That's not because we had some brilliant algorithmic breakthrough, it's because we trained on our data. I loved Higher View. It was an absolute blast. Loved the executive team, loved the culture, loved everything about that job. But I had the itch to go do a startup, and I think a lot of founders have that itch. They think, what would happen if I was in charge, if I could actually fly? Who knows what could happen? And I like to tease first-time founders. Everyone thinks they're building the next Facebook version of their vertical, and I definitely thought I was building the next Facebook version of AI. So we started, David Gonzalez, my co-founder, and we started a deep learning AutoML company called Zeph, and we were focused on automating building deep learning models around video, audio, text, images, and more importantly, multimodal approaches. So we were allowing people to build models that would combine audio with video. And we did some of the first deployments on the NVIDIA TX2 chip, on Lambdas, on Amazon when that came out, on iPhone Core ML, and on Android with TensorLite. Learned a lot of very valuable lessons doing a startup. Honestly got my ass kicked. Really humbled me. Understood the need for value, the need for urgency, but also communication. How do you communicate with executives in the sales process? And eventually, 3 years later, that company was acquired by DataRobot, so I joined as their chief AI evangelist. I worked in the marketing department for 2 years. I worked on some big strategic thought leadership pieces, worked very closely with our founder, CEO at the time, and then I also helped with sales when it came to webinars, podcasts, but also executive conversations and thought leadership sessions. After 2 years, I switched jobs and went and joined the innovation group as the chief AI strategist, and I worked on improving our innovation, but I continued to work on the sales process. And this brings up an interesting topic. So some people like to be single-threaded. So when I was doing the deep learning startup as the chief AI officer for Zeph, I was full-time coding all the time with deep learning, and that allows me to gain a better understanding of high-performance computing within the domain of deep learning. The other thing to bring up too, so before I end that thought, if you're single-threaded, you're really good at something. If you're multi-threaded, it brings a mature perspective where you understand how the different elements of the business interact. And I liked being multi-threaded because when it comes to innovation, people can be siloed, they can be academic. And by understanding, can a seller sell it, can a marketer market this, can a user use this in product, it helps inform your innovation decisions. Also doing a startup, I'm a big fan of failing quickly. So if a bunch of smart people come up with an idea, I like to understand how can we fail on this as quickly as possible, doing the least amount of work. And so that can be, can I validate it with sellers to see if sellers can sell this? Can I talk to the marketers to see if we can do a standalone webinar, or talk to analysts to see if they care about this? Can I test with product and talk to users to see if this is something where users would use it? And so I really think about attribution when it comes to innovation. The other thing I like about innovation is sometimes you need to put pressure on innovation. You need to bring a sense of urgency so you can reduce the sprint cycles, 4-week sprints, even 1-week sprints, to not to productionize something or to finish it, but to scope it. I think that's really helpful. I've done a lot of innovation in the past in AI that I can point to if there's interest there. The last 7 years of my career, I really focused on storytelling. So I started developing a personal brand. I've got 56,000 followers on LinkedIn, many of them in the data science AI space, but also many of them are more at the executive level. I've traveled the world speaking on AI. I've been invited to give keynotes and talks from Dublin, Madrid, Sydney, South Africa, all over the US. I've been invited to present to various branches of the US government. I've been invited to present to companies like SpaceX, Red Bull, Goldman Sachs, Procter & Gamble, Amazon, a bunch of different companies. And the theme that was happening there, I was coupling innovation with storytelling. And if you do those two well, it can do some really great things. And so I tell people, when you give a talk, it needs to be remembered forever. And ideally, when you give an important talk, the talk needs to live on. The story actually has to grow legs and replicate. And what that means is someone in the audience needs to go home and tell their loved one what they saw. And the talk design that I've done in the past that's worked well when it comes to sales and thought leadership is a 2-part, where the opening, I call that the emotional opener. That's where you really, the goal is to shock someone. You're trying to show them an AI application or some innovation that the team has done where it awakens the inner child, art of the possible, really rips the rug out from under them. And what I find by doing that is it brings their guard down and it builds a lot of trust. And then you want to have the rational close, and the rational close focuses on the applied use cases. It brings a sense of urgency. So they're more likely to dive into proof of value sooner. The other thing with thought leadership with AI, especially at the executive level, is most people have done a terrible job. And the reason they've done a terrible job is they go into the details, there's a lot of jargon. And if I'm an executive listening to most AI thought leadership talks, there is no urgency, and I don't understand how this is going to deliver value this quarter. And so that is something I've really enjoyed with my messaging. And one of the tricks I've done when I'm talking to executives, I like to say, I know what it feels like to be a junior data scientist hoping to prove I'm smart. I know what it feels like to be a chief data scientist where I'm hiring and firing data scientists and I'm trying to communicate value to executives and I'm struggling. It's awkward, it's hard to deliver value and to communicate that to other executives. But I know the worst thing of all. I know what it feels like to pay data science payroll out of my personal bank account. And when you do that, it changes the value discussion. And having that type of intro with executives builds a lot of trust. So now to kind of change gears and focus on what's next for me, I don't want a job. And maybe to kind of give more context, we're all going to die. And I am more likely to die sooner than others because I'm a real adrenaline junkie. I'm up in the mountains. I do trail running at night by myself. And I do backcountry skiing by myself on Mount Superior and some of these pretty extreme peaks where I've been caught in avalanches and things. We are all going to die, and that's why I want to be doing work that lights a fire in my soul. And I told our ex-chairman, if I don't believe I'm working for the #1 AI company in the world, I struggle with my mental health. I actually get depressed. And so whichever company I join, I need to join a company where they are working on impossible problems with smart people that are driven, that think they can change the world, because that is what I need to do. And working for different verticals to transform, there's a good chance I just don't have the interest. So I'm not looking for a job where I'm not obsessed about the job. And I have strong passions around healthcare. I have strong passions around, is it possible to build the Singularity or AGI? I have strong passions around smart home. I have strong passions around platform. Like, is there an AI company out there that believes they can really push the envelope and be the leading AI company in the world? I like the variety. A platform company will hit lots of verticals. And so whatever I do, I need to do something big. I want to do something with really smart people. And maybe to tease smart people come up with dumb ideas all the time. And that's why I like to bring process. I like to bring process to innovation. The other thing I'll say too is you have to run a business and make money. I get that. And that's why I like being involved in sales, thought leadership, marketing, verticalization. I want my KPIs to be attached to revenue and in execution. But because if that's going well, then I want to spend the 10% of the time doing things that inspire the world, whether they're innovations in healthcare or they are art of the possible. So I did a project last fall with NVIDIA and Snowflake where I organized a team. We went out to Jackson Hole, went out into the Wind River Range, and we had a film crew where we worked to teach an AI system to predict if a fish would roll on a dry fly cast, which was a lot of fun. Those types of projects really inspire me. I've got another project in the queue where I want to teach an AI system to generate art, like the DALL-E 2 art using the brain with EEG, where an artist is looking at a TV in the desert. And so for me, I can actually justify those projects completely because they fit in the marketing, thought leadership, sales engine, go-to-market engine. I can actually attach revenue to those projects, but for me, they give me soul, and that inspires me. Where are we going with AI? So in the future, platforms are going to expand on data types. They're going to be faster time to value, anticipated action, and eventually we will move out of anticipated action and go into the realm of Jarvis for everyone. So eventually all of these will reach a point. Which company will get to that point faster is to be determined. Right now I'm looking for a team that will light a fire in me and challenge me to kind of new levels. So thanks everyone. This is my Blitz interview. Not a fit for most companies, but I'm a fit for a few, and I'm willing to, really bleed and give so much effort into a few of these companies. So hopefully that can narrow it down and save people time. I love marketing, thought leadership, innovation, etc. That's Ben.